Between 2020 and 2024, the Alabama Department of Corrections settled 124 lawsuits involving correctional officers and inmates, costing taxpayers $57 million in these settlements. Over 75% of these claims were claims made by the inmates that the correctional officers had used excessive force against them. Today, we're going to be looking into the treatment of these inmates in the Alabama, specifically men's prisons, by the Alabama Department of Corrections and correctional officers specifically. And this may be important to you if you are an Alabamian and you're paying these taxes and they're defending these alleged abusers. And also depending on your degree. I am studying social work. This is important to me. It could also be important to someone studying law or criminal justice. So beginning with the excessive force. Excessive force is the use or threatening of physical dominance or physicality against an individual to subdue the individual or a situation that goes beyond what is objectively necessary. And in many of these cases, as we will discuss in just a moment, these have led individuals to either be permanently disabled, in the hospital, or in some cases dead. In 2020, the Federal Department of Justice filed an investigation into the Alabama men's prison systems, and the biggest claim was their unconstitutional use of excessive force against inmates. And just in this filing, they listed 17 examples of excessive force that harmed these individuals. Another example, in the 2019 filming of the HBO documentary, The Alabama Solution, we follow the story of a man named Steve Davis. And the story is that Steve Davis had a homemade knife or shiv, as many inmates do, to defend themselves, and seemed to be threatening according to the officers. So they told him to put it down. He put it down, put himself on the ground as they asked. And the officers continued to beat him. They used their batons to hit him on the head. And one inmate even claimed that a correctional officer was stomping Davis's head until it bounced on the ground like a basketball. That officer was Roderick Gadsden. Roderick Gadsden had been named in 25 previous claims by inmates of excessive abuse, excessive force. Steve Davis was taken to the ICU, where he eventually succumbed to his injuries and died. Now looking into the living conditions of these inmates, looking into the Alabama Solutions documentary again, we follow Robert Earl Counsel and Melvin Ray. In one example, Robert Earl was sent to solitary confinement where his entire cell was riddled with mice. There were mice all over his floor. He had jarred some of them to try to be his own exterminator and get rid of them. They were in his toilet swimming around. They were everywhere. They were not being taken care of. And in some of the other videos, the inmates walked down the halls and you could see rust and mold on the walls and on the floors, standing water, and blood from previous fights that no one had cleaned up. Another inmate who was previously incarcerated was interviewed by WVTM 13 News on October 16th of 2023. He describes his living conditions there. He said it was just gross and overall nasty, and in one of the facilities he was in, the ceiling was even caving in, and when it would rain, water would flood into that section of the prison, leading to mold and eventually leading to health issues for some of the inmates. And many of these inmates are the elderly. and they are not able to fully live well and in a healthy way in these living conditions. And because of the lack of funding that is put into the prison systems, the staff is very low and oftentimes not adequate. So many of the individuals, the inmates in the prisons, have to work inside the prisons for dollars a day and even outside of the prisons. We follow one man in the documentary, The Alabama Solutions. He said he worked in the state's capital with the sanitary board for about 10 years. And every time he went up for parole, he was denied. So he's good enough to work in the capital, but not good enough to be released and live outside of the prison. And he said he was only earning a couple of dollars a day. In conclusion, the treatment of these inmates is unconstitutional, and these facilities were meant to be rehabilitation centers so that these individuals could rehabilitate themselves and re-enter society. The Alabama Department of Corrections is not following through on that. They are unconstitutionally treating their inmates and not correcting much at all. Thank you for your time. I hope that this was well informed, and have a great day.